yourself around. Turn yourself around. Turn it upside down. Turn yourself around.
Bad Reputation is a glorious record. Bad Reputation saw Tony Visconti come into the lives of Thin Lizzy's guys as a producer, and what Tony Visconti did was enhance what actually was happening musically. Maybe not as good an album as Jailbreak, perhaps not even as good as Johnny the Fox, but the sound is fantastic on the likes of Bad Reputation, Dancing in the Moonlight.
But I'm dancing in the moonlight. It's caught me in its spotlight. It's alright. Dancing in the moonlight.
Which is just classic Phil Lynott sort of concept, fantastic. It's sort of more or less autobiographical, just great image, and a lovely song, really nice piece of music.
That was had tremendous saxophone from John Irish Earl, which obviously meant that whenever they were playing it on the stage, they had to have a sax man popping on to take the limelight for a couple of minutes.
So there's some nice lighter moments, so it was nice to hear Thin Lizzy in a sort of more maybe reflective mood, still with the menace and the darkness of the guitar work and the sort of downy sort of dark, broody pounding drums. There's all those elements of the classic Lizzy are still there.
Turn yourself around. Turn yourself around. Turn it upside down.
Bad Reputation, I think, was a bit of a transitional album. Nobody was quite sure whether Robbo was in or out of the band, so Scott did a lot of the double tracking guitars himself. It got the definitive lineup, it had done very well, and nobody was really sure who was coming, who was going. Gary Moore, Midge-Ure, Brian Robertson. It was a little bit of a holding operation, but one or two good tracks on there.
I think Phil was still very much at the height of his powers, and it was their best-selling record, as far as I remember. So for me, it wasn't particularly disappointing. It was Thin Lizzy, maybe not at their very, very best, where I think The Boys Are Back in Town was, the Jailbreak album, but still keeping up that level. And obviously the public loved it because they bought it in bucket loads.
There are so many good songs on this album, and Tony Visconti took it all and made it happen with almost a flash of genius. Tony Visconti in his own way was so used to dealing with great talents who were not necessarily difficult but mercurial, the likes of Bowie, and he brought all that experience to bear in bringing out the best from Lynott, something no other producer had ever done before and was never to do again.
Visconti was probably urging him or leading him into a very commercial direction, because Visconti definitely had that knack as a record producer. I think maybe Phil Lynott was attracted to the idea and liked the thought of being up there with the sort of the Jaggers and the such like those kind of people. But at the same time, the kind of raw energy, rock energy, and raw power and passion of everything that Lynott had sort of put into Lizzy, I think he was aware that that could all sort of be dissolved and sort of fall away. So there's a slight kind of dichotomy. It's a slightly unsettled record as a result, I think.
I think you have to say Live and Dangerous is definitely one of the seminal live albums, but I think you also have to say that rather like Frampton Comes Alive, it may have been dangerous, but it wasn't all live. They actually recorded that album before Johnny the Fox and popped, I think, a track in from Johnny just to update it a little bit. But it was held back about 18 months before it saw the light of day. Now, part of that was they felt they wanted another studio album to consolidate before they put the live one out. But I think also during those 18 months perhaps it had a little powder and paint applied.
In its day, I think it was one of the best live albums around. You know, my generation, we went out and bought, you know, Deep Purple's Made in Japan. How do you beat that? Rockin' the Fillmore, Humble Pie, Uriah Heep Live. And then of course you had this rather melodic but rocking album, which was the Thin Lizzy album, and it got played to death by all and sundry. But in reality, it wasn't a brilliant live album because allegedly it was recorded in the studio, or a lot of it was.
Things like backing vocals were not always the guitarist's forte, so I'm certain that they went back and retouched those. And obviously Who, when playing guitar, hasn't dropped the odd bum note here and there, so they would have dropped those in.
So for a purist, one could say it's not very good. But as an album that sounded good and sold well, you couldn't fault it.
I would put Live and Dangerous as probably the successor to Made in Japan as the double live album of the rock field, and certainly the choice of repertoire was very good. The playing's good, as I say, the backing vocals are better than they should be, but obviously what comes over and what Lizzy were all about was Phil coming over as the cheeky singer frontman, the charismatic leader, and obviously that comes out, so it was a success.
Through the devil's canyon, across a battlefield, death has no companion, the spirit's forced.
Live and Dangerous was probably the peak of their popularity. Certainly chart-wise it did extremely well, and you don't get too many live double albums going into the top 10. It was a success on anybody's scale, I feel, but they had problems coming up because of course Brian Robertson was soon to depart the scene.
Brian Robertson joined the band at a young age, at 17, which is possibly why his lifestyle kind of got slightly pretty much out of control. It probably went to his head, the gigs, the after shows, the girls, and boy were the girls around Lizzy. So I think he possibly indulged in his two favourite things, whiskey and speed, and it was a bad combination. He would just get very antagonistic and aggressive when he was drunk and high on speed, and would pick fights.
He played hard, worked hard, and I think during part of the playing he got into a little bit of trouble in a pub defending his old Scots pal Frankie Miller. Sustained an injury which meant that he couldn't tour. That was obviously a problem. They had tour lined up. In the end they got Midge Ure to come in and Depp for them, and Midge, like anybody who's played with Thin Lizzy, enjoyed his experience. It was a little bit like playing for Manchester United, Phil's favourite football team. So he was flying off on Concorde with Live and Dangerous in his Walkman, learning the songs as he went.
Lynott realised that to sort of press on and then sort of take Lizzy up to the very sort of the highest echelons of the rock industry, it probably wasn't going to be with Brian Robertson around.
When the kings and queens would dance in the realm of the black rose, play me their melodies, I want to know, so I can teach my children. Oh.
Gary Moore was a member of Thin Lizzy on so many different occasions, it's difficult to know when he was out of the band. He came in and toured with them, left, came in again to replace Brian Robertson, left, came back again. He was in, out, and his relationship with Phil Lynott went back to pre-Lizzy days when they were in a band in Ireland called Skid Row.
And there was a little bit of friction going on in as much as Gary and Phil, both pals, obviously Parisian Walkways and what have you, but Gary had actually depped in the band before, back in the days when Eric Bell had left, but it was only going to be a short-lived liaison. I think the album as a whole, Black Rose, was something of a Celtic symphony, something of a concept album, worked better than Johnny the Fox.